One of the most common things to do is to create a formula. So we're going to see how to do that, and we're going to see how to use a few of the functions within a formula. So right now, if I'm going to create some data, so let's say I have 10, 20, 10, and I've got 30. And I want to add all of this up. So I'm going to start off with a formula to do that, and it's going to sum everything. So I start off with the equal sign. And the equal sign is showing right here in my cell. It's also showing up here in this window. I can type it either place. I'm just going to work in this cell, and that's probably what you'll do most of the time. So if I say sum, you can see here it's giving me a hint of different things. I just want the regular sum, which you can see in the hint. It says adds all the numbers in a range of cells. A range is just a continuous segment of cells. So this continuous segment of cells is going to be cells 1 through 4. So I'll start with the parentheses to open this function. So here I'm building a formula, and I'm opening this function called sum. I'm using this function called sum. And what I can do now, there's two ways to get this range. I can drag. You can see here I've got it highlighted, and the dots around this highlighter kind of marching, I guess you could say, are moving. And it's saying A1 colon A4. This colon signifies a range. It's saying we're going from A1 to A4. At this point, I'm done basically with this function. I can add a closed parentheses, or I can just tab out. I'll go ahead and just add the closed parentheses, and now I'll tab out. And here's my formula. Now, there's another way I can do this if I just want some of the numbers in here. And I'm going to start over with my formula, which just means I can click the equal sign, and it will overwrite whatever was in there. And I'll say I want to add row 1 and row 4, and that's all. So I'll click row 1, and then I'll do a plus row 4. So you can see this is not a range. These are not continuous cells. We're actually just picking out the different cells that we want. There's no parentheses because I'm not using any particular function. I built this as a simple addition formula, and now I'll tab out. And I've got my sum of those two cells. Now I might want to put a border underneath this, and to do that, click on your Home tab, then click right here in the font box, and there's this little box here. It's actually a border box, and it's got like a cross going through it, and it says an outline. Click that. You'll want a bottom border. So if we look here, we've got bottom border. I've got this cell highlighted over here. This cell is called A4, which means at the top I've got the letter A, and right here I've got the number 4. So this is cell A4. And then if I click bottom border, it's going to apply a bottom border to cell A4. So I'll click that, and I'll tab out. You can see now we've got a bottom border. Now let's say that we want to do a different kind of addition. We want to actually do cells 2 and 3. And I'm going to do it over here because you don't need to do it next to these cells. You can do it wherever you would like to. So I'll start off with an equal again. And I'm going to, I could click like we did earlier, and I would highlight cell 2 and I'd highlight cell 3. But instead, I'm going to say I want cell A2. So just as we referenced this cell when we were adding the border and we called it A4 and we gave it a border, I'm just referencing A2, and then I'm going to say plus. I want A3. And I can type in A3, and it's going to highlight that right there so I'll know which one I'm working with, or I can click it. Either way. And if I tab out, I get my summation. And maybe if I want, I can make this bold, so I can go up here and click. In the font, again, I'm on the Home tab, the most commonly used, and I'll just click bold. But you might have looked at that and said, well, why didn't we do a sum? We could have, because this is continuous. We could work with that range. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and redo this, and I'll say sum. And I'll say A2 to A3. But just because it's 2 cells, it's a little bit more work to type in all of this than just to do A2 plus A3. So it just depends on what you're doing there, but in this case, it was quicker just to do the plus earlier. Now you can go through and do all of these, the basic kinds of math. And so for example, if I want to rework this one, I can click this cell and start reworking it from up here. Or if I tab out of this and click back into it, I can double click this cell and then just move my cursor and hit minus, and that's going to do a subtraction. And then over here, if I want to do a division, if I want to divide cell 4 by cell 3, I can do this, divide this. Tab out, and there's it. There's my division. Or if I double click into here, I can rework this and do a multiplication. And there we go. Now I can go back to the formulas tab, or up to the formulas tab, and I've got all these different formulas I can work with. Here you can see we've got sum, averages, min, max. So if I want to use any of those, let's say I want the average of all of these cells, I'll click equal, I'll click average, well I'll click auto sum, and then I'll select average. Let's see. Okay. And now it's looking at what it thinks we might want to use as an average, which is really not what we want. So if I just click out of this, I'm going to redo that. We're going to try this again. The issue is just the order in which we're applying things. So if I click into this cell and hit delete, I'll clear it out. Notice the cursor is blinking in the cell. I don't want that, so I'm just going to click into this cell over here. Then I'll click back to C3. C3 is highlighted. Then I'll click auto sum, average. Okay, and here's where we were before in the cells that are highlighted. I'll click on the first cell I want, I'll drag down to get this full range. Now you can see we have the cells that we want to calculate against, and I'll tab out. And there's the proper value. Now, if I would have done this and hit enter and tried to do average, it wouldn't have worked right. You can see here nothing's really happening. Or if I clear this and I just have my cursor in here and then I go back and I do average, again, nothing's happening. What you need is just have the cell highlighted without the cursor in it. You do that by not double clicking into it. So if I go back and I hit average, then it's trying to determine something to average, and all we have to do is come around behind it, select the cells we want, and tab out, and that will give us our average.